Lauren Brennan was a dedicated 31-year-old trauma nurse with a promising future, a tight-knit family, and no known enemies. So, when she called her father, Charles Brennan, in a panic at 2:49 a.m. and then vanished without a trace, it shattered everything they thought they knew about her life. Within hours, a chilling mystery began to unfold, one involving a missing hospital file, a man with a stolen identity, and a voice message Lauren never got the chance to send. On the night of November 8, 2022, Elk River, Minnesota, was blanketed in a sharp, cold silence. The small town, bordered by winding woods and lazy rivers, was used to its stillness after dark. Street lights cast dull orange glows on the sidewalks, and not a single car passed along the empty residential lanes. The only sound was the occasional gust of wind, shaking bare branches against windows and rooftops. At 2:49 a.m., that silence was quietly interrupted. Charles Brennan, a retired fire chief and widowed father of two, received a call from his daughter, Lauren Brennan. He didn't hear the phone ring. It sat charging on his nightstand while he slept in the other room, with the television humming low, volume barely audible. The call lasted only 7 seconds before it ended. No voicemail, no second attempt. Lauren was 31 years old. She had lived her entire life in Minnesota, rarely venturing far from the place she called home. Kind-hearted and ambitious, she had worked her way up to become a registered trauma nurse at Mercy Hospital, often taking on extra shifts to help cover staff shortages. Known for her calm demeanor and empathy with patients, Lauren had become somewhat of a cornerstone at the hospital. Her co-workers respected her, and her patients adored her. She had recently been working more overnight shifts due to staffing gaps, something that concerned her father. They had talked on the phone 2 nights earlier, and she'd sounded tired but upbeat. She mentioned she was picking up one more shift before taking the weekend off, and she planned to catch up on sleep and finish a book she had started. She made no mention of trouble or anything unusual. When Charles woke just after 6 in the morning, he glanced at his phone, still plugged in and fully charged. A missed call notification glared at him. 2:49 a.m. Lauren Brennan. He stared at it for a moment, blinking in confusion. His immediate reaction was worry. Lauren never called that late unless something was seriously wrong. He tried calling her back. The line rang 6 times, then went to voicemail. He tried again. Still nothing. He left a message asking her to call back right away. He sent a text next. "Is everything okay? Call me." 20 minutes passed, no reply. He paced around his kitchen, phone in hand, waiting, watching the screen, hoping it would light up again. It never did. By 7:15 a.m., Charles couldn't take the waiting anymore. He got dressed and drove the 12 minutes to her condo on the east side of town. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a grayish hue over the sleepy neighborhood. Her silver Hyundai Elantra was in the driveway, parked straight, no signs of damage. He rang the bell. No answer. He knocked louder, called out her name. Nothing. With rising panic, he tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. The interior was quiet. Lauren's coat was hanging on the hook beside the door. Her purse was on the kitchen table. Her keys were inside. Her work badge, shoes, and hospital scrubs were neatly folded in a basket by the hallway. Her phone was nowhere in sight. The bed was made, untouched. Bathroom lights were off. No signs of struggle. No broken glass. No overturned furniture. Everything appeared normal. Eerily so. Charles called 911 at 7:32 a.m. reporting his daughter missing. Officers arrived less than 20 minutes later. A missing persons case was opened immediately. Because Lauren was a responsible adult with no history of running away or substance issues, and because her father had documented that she called in the middle of the night before vanishing, the case was considered high priority. By noon, search efforts had begun. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood. No one saw anything unusual. One neighbor, however, said he believed Lauren got home around 1:30 a.m., as he remembered seeing headlights in her driveway when he got up for water. That would mean the call to her father came more than an hour after she had arrived home. What happened between then and her disappearance? Why call him and say nothing? Why leave no voicemail? The answers were buried in those 7 seconds of silence, and the long night that swallowed her whole. As the first full day of Lauren Brennan's disappearance unfolded, a wave of unease spread through the community. Posters went up across Elk River with her face printed in bold letters, missing. Her bright green eyes, framed by thick lashes and auburn hair, smiled gently from every telephone pole, gas station window, and coffee shop bulletin board. Local news stations aired the story before the 6 o'clock news hour. A 31-year-old nurse, last seen at home, called her father at 2:49 a.m. and vanished. At first glance, Lauren had no reason to disappear. She had a stable job, a condo she was proud of, and a father she spoke to regularly. Her mother had passed away from cancer 6 years earlier, and since then, she and Charles had developed a strong, quiet bond. They checked in with each other almost daily. She was not the kind of person to vanish on a whim. She was not the kind of person to make people worry without reason. That's what made it all feel so off, so wrong. Investigators began by digging deeper into her recent history. The first thing they found was the abrupt end to her engagement with Tyler Nash, her boyfriend of 5 years. The breakup had happened just 6 weeks earlier. Friends had expected a wedding announcement, not a sudden split. According to Lauren's closest friend, Rachel, something had shifted overnight. Lauren had called her late one evening, shaken and nearly in tears. All she said was, "I can't marry someone who lies to my face." When pressed, she had refused to explain. She cut off contact with Tyler shortly afterward. He blocked his number, deleted old messages, and unfollowed him on social media. It was as if she wanted to erase him from her life, but without ever telling anyone why. Detectives brought Tyler in for an interview. On paper, he looked clean. No criminal history, employed in IT at a medical software firm, no record of domestic violence. He admitted the breakup had caught him off guard, but insisted that it ended civilly. He claimed they hadn't spoken since early October. But digital forensics told a different story. Phone records showed he had texted her just 36 hours before she vanished. The text read, "You don't know what you've done." When investigators asked about it, Tyler was vague. He said it was about being hurt, about the way she had ended things and cut him off. He insisted he was just emotional, and that it didn't mean anything. Investigators weren't satisfied. They requested a search of his home, which he declined at first. They found that odd, but not illegal. Without a warrant or clear evidence, there was little they could do. Surveillance footage from his apartment parking lot placed him at home the entire night Lauren disappeared. No movement, no visitors, no car leaving. Still, something about his behavior felt rehearsed, controlled. Lauren's co-workers were next. She was loved by most, but a few nurses said she had been more distracted in recent weeks. One even noted she'd been carrying a personal journal around with her, something she never used to do. When the police searched Lauren's condo again more thoroughly, they found the journal tucked deep in a drawer, beneath old birthday cards and receipts. The entries started off routine: notes about work, to-do lists, reminders to pick up groceries. But the last few pages revealed a sense of paranoia. One entry stood out. It read, "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Too many lies have unraveled. I'm not safe anymore." Another said, "I'm being watched. I don't know if I'm overthinking it or if it's real, but I can feel it. Every time I leave the hospital, someone's nearby." She never named names. But something had clearly shaken her. Whoever it was, whatever she had discovered, she hadn't told anyone the full story. Not her father, not her friends, not even in her own writing. She left only fragments, unfinished thoughts, hints. The deeper investigators dug, the more it seemed that Lauren had been holding something in, a private fear, a hidden threat. Maybe it was someone from her past. Maybe it was someone closer than anyone realized. But until more evidence surfaced, all anyone had were suspicions, and a growing sense that Lauren's disappearance was not random at all. As investigators pushed deeper into the third day of Lauren Brennan's disappearance, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to dread. There were still no credible sightings, no credit card activity, no calls, no pings from her phone. It was as if she had stepped out into the darkness and been swallowed whole. Authorities continued searching the surrounding woods, combing the trails, frozen ditches, and riverside bends, but each effort came up empty. Drones were deployed to scan nearby forested areas. Cadaver dogs sniffed through backyards and abandoned buildings. Volunteers, friends, and strangers alike joined in the search. Still, nothing. Then, something shifted. On the morning of November 12th, 4 days after Lauren vanished, a farmer in nearby Becker Township reported something unusual near the edge of his property. His land bordered a stretch of disused train tracks that curved away from town and into a dense, leafless forest. He said he found a woman's shoe, muddy, soaked, and partially buried under a layer of wet leaves. A white hospital ID badge was discovered not far from it, the name smudged but still legible, Lauren Brennan. The area was cordoned off immediately. Forensic teams swept the scene while drones returned to search overhead. Nearby, just 50 yards from the badge, a cell phone was recovered, partially water-damaged and dead. It matched the make and model of Lauren's, though investigators would need to confirm it through serial number. Even more curious was that the SIM card had been removed and was not found nearby. Someone had intentionally disabled it. This discovery changed the tone of the investigation. It no longer looked like a case of someone walking off voluntarily or suffering a mental health crisis. This pointed toward interference, possibly abduction, possibly worse. The discovery sparked a renewed urgency. Detectives re-examined every name that had surfaced so far, including Tyler Nash, the ex-fiancé, who once again denied involvement. He claimed he had never been to Becker Township and had no idea why her belongings would show up there. His alibi from the night of her disappearance still checked out, but detectives noted his visible agitation in the second interview. His behavior had grown defensive. He frequently asked if they had found a body. No one else had brought up the possibility of death. While combing through Lauren's work computer at the hospital, digital analysts stumbled upon something curious in her email account. 3 weeks prior to her disappearance, Lauren had begun receiving encrypted messages from an unknown email address. The messages were short, cryptic, and filled with phrases like, "You're in over your head," and "You don't know what he's capable of." She never responded to them, but she didn't report them either. Instead, she had saved them all in a folder labeled Watch List. Investigators attempted to trace the source, but the sender had used a VPN, and the email was routed through multiple servers, likely to avoid detection. Whoever it was knew what they were doing. This revelation brought a new theory into focus. Lauren had discovered something dangerous. Investigators began to suspect that the source of her fear, referenced in her journal, may not have been Tyler after all. There was another potential link that no one had paid close attention to, a patient named Craig Farlow, who had been admitted to the trauma unit 6 times in the past year alone. Lauren had treated him personally, twice. On both occasions, he had arrived unconscious, under the influence of drugs, and in possession of no ID. Staff remembered him because of how aggressive he became when awake. He would shout at nurses, accuse doctors of lying, and insist someone was trying to take him out. Lauren, being calm and composed, had once had to de-escalate a scene when he started throwing trays in the ER. Hospital security logs showed that Craig had returned 2 weeks prior, but this time he hadn't been admitted. Instead, he'd been seen loitering near the parking structure, alone and watching. Security had asked him to leave. When shown a photo, Charles Brennan confirmed that Craig looked familiar. He believed he saw him in the hospital lobby. The week before Lauren vanished, suddenly a new possibility emerged. What if Lauren's disappearance wasn't about her ex, but about something, or someone, she came across at work. The theory was troubling. Lauren had access to sensitive information in trauma cases, including records that connected emergency visits to criminal investigation. If she had stumbled onto something, like patient evidence linked to drug trafficking, assault, or something even more dangerous, then her silence, her journal entries, and her 249-day IEM call all made a twisted kind of sense. She hadn't just disappeared. Someone had made sure of it. The fourth chapter in the investigation began with a sense of urgency and quiet panic. As pieces of Lauren Brennan's life were slowly pulled into focus, investigators realized that they were dealing with something far more calculated and sinister than they had initially believed. The discovery of her damaged phone, the eerie encrypted emails, and the sudden appearance of Craig Farlow on their radar painted a disturbing picture, one that suggested Lauren hadn't simply disappeared, she had been silenced. With no firm leads, detectives turned their attention back to the digital forensics team, who had been working on retrieving data from Lauren's waterlogged phone. After days of careful extraction, they finally got access to fragments of data, mostly scrambled and partial, but one audio file stood out. It was an unsent voice message Lauren had recorded just after midnight on the night she vanished. It began with heavy breathing, the sound of distant footsteps, and a low, shaky whisper. Her voice said, "I think he's outside. I didn't answer the door. I don't know what he wants. Please, Dad, if I don't call back—" The message cut off abruptly. It had been recorded just 23 minutes before her last confirmed call to her father. The audio sent chills down the spine of everyone who heard it. Combined with her strange journal entries and the surveillance footage of Craig Farlow lurking near the hospital, a clear pattern of fear began to emerge. Investigators began scouring local traffic cameras, hoping to place Craig, or any other suspicious individual, near Lauren's condo the night she vanished. Hours of footage later, a breakthrough arrived. At 2:11 a.m., a blurry but recognizable image showed a dark SUV circling her block twice. At 2:44 a.m., just 5 minutes before Lauren's call to her father, the same SUV parked across the street from her building. Unfortunately, the license plate wasn't visible. Still, it was enough to launch a search for vehicles matching the make and model. Meanwhile, Lauren's father, Charles, was quietly grappling with a growing guilt he had refused to share publicly. In the days following her disappearance, he admitted to investigators that Lauren had tried to talk to him a week earlier about something complicated. According to him, she seemed scared, but not hysterical. She kept saying she had learned something she wasn't supposed to know. He hadn't pressed her for details, assuming it was related to her breakup or hospital stress. He thought it could wait, but it hadn't. Her final call, brief and panicked, now played over and over in his head like a warning he had failed to hear. Detectives visited Craig Farlow's last known address, only to find it abandoned. The trailer he had been staying in was empty, trashed, and filled with evidence of a quick exit. Fast food wrappers, loose pills, and a torn photograph of Lauren, taken from a hospital staff board, were found beneath the couch cushions, but what caught the most attention was a cheap prepaid phone, left behind with no SIM card. Investigators rushed it to the lab, and even without active data, they were able to retrieve GPS coordinates from recent locations. One location pinged just outside of Becker Township, the very area where Lauren's shoe and ID badge were found. With the connection between Craig and the discovery site now undeniable, the case took a darker tone. Police declared Craig Farlow a person of interest and issued a regional alert. Still, he remained elusive. As the search for him intensified, another discovery took the case in a grim direction. Deep in the wooded area near the train tracks, a set of tire impressions was found, partially frozen and obscured by fallen leaves. The pattern matched the same type of tires used by mid-size SUVs, including the model caught in surveillance. Forensic teams brought in soil samples and confirmed something even more disturbing. traces of blood in the ground near the tire tracks. Lab results identified the blood as Lauren Brennan's. Now it was no longer just a missing person case. The evidence pointed to a crime scene. Someone had brought Lauren there. Something violent had occurred. Yet there was still no body, no clear sequence of events, no resolution. Only the hollow pieces of a terrifying puzzle. And Craig Farlow, a man with no current address, no employer, and no social connections, was now at the center of it. The question was no longer just what happened to Lauren, but how far someone had gone to keep her from ever telling the truth. Days stretched into weeks, and the case of Lauren Brennan's disappearance became a haunting fixture in the community. Her photo was everywhere, on utility poles, bus stops, the windows of local businesses. Candlelight vigils were held in her honor. News outlets ran features on the mystery that had paralyzed the town, a 31-year-old nurse who vanished into the night after calling her father in fear. But behind the public display of sympathy, the investigation had reached a boiling point. Detectives were under pressure, and with Craig Farlow still missing, there was a sense that time was slipping away, and so was the hope of finding Lauren alive. A task force was formed, combining state investigators with the FBI, and a broader canvas of Craig's background was ordered. What they found shocked even seasoned aliases. Craig had used over 7 different aliases in the past decade. He had a record of low-level offenses, trespassing, drug possession, and resisting arrest. But under a different name, in another state, he had once been questioned in connection with a missing person case from 2017. A woman in Ohio had vanished shortly after Craig had befriended her at a recovery center. That case had gone cold. No one had tied it to him. Until now. The FBI tracked Craig's last known digital footprint to a remote gas station security camera 2 states away. He had purchased fuel, snacks, and a prepaid cell phone with cash. The timestamp on the footage was 5 days after Lauren's disappearance. No one had seen or heard from him since. Agents believed he was on the run, but what he was running from, what he had done, still had no concrete answer. Without a body, there was no murder charge. Without a confession, there was only suspicion. But that changed in the most unexpected way. On the 34th day after Lauren's disappearance, a hiker stumbled upon something in the woods near an old irrigation trail 10 miles from the Becker Township search site. It was a shallow grave, hastily covered in moss and leaves. Law enforcement arrived immediately, and forensic teams began to uncover what was buried. Wrapped in a black tarp and bound with nylon rope was the body of a woman. Dental records and a fingerprint taken from her hand confirmed what everyone had feared. Lauren Brennan had been found. Her body showed signs of blunt force trauma to the head and ligature marks around her wrists and ankles. Toxicology reports revealed traces of a powerful sedative. Investigators now had what they needed. The scene, though degraded by time and the elements, told a story. Lauren had likely been taken from her home, drugged, restrained, and eventually killed. The shallow grave suggested haste and panic. The method pointed to someone with just enough knowledge to hide a body, but not enough to do it right. A warrant was issued for Craig Farlow on charges of kidnapping and first-degree murder. The manhunt intensified. Tips began pouring in from all over the country. He had been seen in abandoned motels, hitchhiking, even panhandling near a bus station. Each lead brought a moment of hope, followed by disappointment. Then, in early January, a breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Craig had been arrested under a false name in rural Tennessee after attempting to steal a car. His fingerprints matched and authorities were notified. When questioned, he refused to speak. He asked for a lawyer, then sat in silence for hours. But inside his duffel bag, among dirty clothes and canned food, investigators found a spiral notebook. It contained pages of incoherent writing, rants about people watching him, symbols and diagrams, but one entry, scribbled hastily in the margins, stood out. She knew. She read the file. She said she'd tell. I had no choice. That sentence sealed everything. Though the motive remained partially unclear, investigators believed Lauren had accessed a sensitive patient record or incident report that linked Craig to something illegal, possibly connected to drugs or another disappearance. When she confronted him or expressed concern, it had triggered his paranoia. What followed was a violent spiral that ended in her death. Lauren's funeral drew hundreds, and her father, Charles Brennan, stood stoic at the podium, thanking those who never gave up on his daughter. He held up the voice message she had tried to send that night as a reminder to everyone of the fear she felt, of the warning signs, and of the silence he wished he hadn't kept. In the end, Lauren didn't vanish without a trace. She left behind a trail, small, broken pieces that, when finally assembled, told the truth. Not just about what happened to her, but about how darkness can hide in plain sight, and how even in the quietest moments, someone is always watching.